want to talk about some learning practices in online communities. And like Vanessa mentioned, my name is Helen Blunden, or you might find me on Twitter as Activate Learn, where I show and share a lot of different things related to different types of learning activities. So if you're on Twitter and you're not following me, please feel free to do so, because that's where I do share a lot of things. So a little bit about myself first. I am a community manager, just like Vanessa mentioned, at Adopt and Embrace, and we are a Microsoft partner. And what we do is we help organisations and their people streamline their business and work practices using Microsoft 365. And what I do there is I'm a community manager. So what happens is I manage a community of mainly IT, change, HR, business people who are responsible for digital transformation in their organisation. And I say digital transformation quite in jest, because we've all been through a transformational journey at the moment. But a lot of companies might not have the teams of people who are able to train their people on Microsoft 365, to coach them through all the different systems and the platforms that are out there, and also show them good work practices. So I've got a community of all these people where they show and share their work, they share their resources, they get in discussions about how they currently do this within their organisations. And I'm actually quite new to this role. I keep saying new, I've been in it for about a couple of years now, but I feel as if, I don't know about you, but I'm constantly learning in my day job. Every single day there's always something new to learn. Now, in my own time, I like to kind of describe myself as a continual and lifelong learner. And I feel as if sometimes I'm not actually working, I'm actually learning at work, if that makes sense, because I'm constantly looking at ways of improving workflows, looking at how to do things differently, looking at how to use tools to engage people, to enable them to contribute more, to get them to, learn new things in different ways, and then apply those to their work. And one of the ways I do that is what's known as working out loud. Now, this is the very first practice that you can use in your online community, and you can take a note of it, working out loud, and do a bit of a Google search. But we're going to talk about this afterwards anyway. So what I do is I show and share my work and my process of thinking and my learning quite openly and transparently. So it mainly means that a lot of the stuff that I'm doing is actually quite crap. Like, they're in the process, they're in the moment of me thinking about things. And what this does is that it allows for people to see what I'm doing, and it engages straight away with some commentary. Helen, have you tried this? Helen, have you, thought of this? Helen, let me put you in contact with so-and-so who can help you in this aspect. And what that does is that throughout me working out loud and using this particular learning practice in my communities, but also in my social networks, I've had an opportunity to grow expertise areas or build capabilities. And one example of that is doing videos, creating and editing videos, which I never used to do, but through working out loud, I was able to do this. And that has then brought some fascinating opportunities that come my way. One example was being a community global reporter for Microsoft Ignite, which is one of Microsoft's largest tech conferences. So I would say that your first learning practice in a community is think of ways of how to engage your people to work out loud, show the process of their thinking. Another way I do this is by trying to glean information to come to me, and that information, if I find out in the communities or the networks, if I come across a great article, if I come across a tip or a tool that I could use, I will retweet it, but I retweet it with a certain hashtag, and I use 3 hashtags, and these hashtags are kind of like my search functionality. So I want to get information to come to me when I need it. So the 3 hashtags that I use is hashtag always be learning. So if I find anything of general nature or inspirational, I'll share that out. If it's anything to do with tips or tools that people can use, it's hashtag activate my learning. And you can actually search for these right now on Twitter or even on LinkedIn. If you do a search on these things, you'll actually pull some articles and tools that I've got for you to look at. And then if I find anything that, I want to experiment on it, I want to actually try it out, I want to dabble in it, I'll share it out, but I'll use hashtag Helen's experiments. And then what I do in the back end, what you don't see, is I've automated the entire process using some automation tools that kind of puts it into some task sheets that I allocate every day, at least 5-10 minutes every day, where I could use these experiments and dabble in. So already I've told you 2 things that you can do in your learning communities around learning practices, which is think of ways to show and share your work transparently. That's the first one. And the second thing is think of ways of getting information to come to you. You know, what are the good things that your community is sharing? Add a hashtag so then you're able to kind of pull that together. So what does learning mean to you? Let's have a look here. Transformation, integrating new information in my life, analysing processes, growth, opportunity, knowledge sharing, growth, growing, confidence, exposure, knowledge gathering. There's some really, really good answers here. Learning means a lot of different things to different people, and therein lays my problem with me trying to explain what learning is to different people, because it all means different things. So look, there's no right or wrong answer here. So automatically it means that learning is some kind of process that you have to go through, where there is some discovery, there's some growth, there's some opportunities for building new knowledge. Brilliant. So let's look at the next one, the community. Now this one, I assume, being community managers or within communities, this would be a lot easier to respond to. And I see here that you've written belonging. It's a group of people that you interact with regularly, a group of like-minded people to connect, collaborate and learn. Connection, belonging. Belonging seems to be a word that keeps popping up, which is great. Connecting with others, connection, a family. Brilliant. So this is really good. So let's move on to what kind of learning practices are currently in your community. This is going to be interesting. So let's have a look. Asking each other questions, fantastic. Q&A, sharing articles and tips, brilliant. Okay. Q&A, knowledge articles, knowledge sharing. Gee, there's a lot of knowledge sharing here. Kindness, that's lovely. Where I work, I usually end up playing teacher with the information. Yeah, that happens. That's true. That happens sometimes. Tuesdays and Thursdays, tips and tricks and work out loud prompts. Brilliant. So these are tactics that you can use in your communities. Others have written workshops, events, discussions, applications to practice. Fantastic. Reading and shared experience. Fantastic. Look, there's no right or wrong answer here with learning practices. What I wanted to really show you here today was somehow my difficulty in the past was kind of trying to explain what learning is. Learning is the process. It's not an event. It's not an activity, although it can be, but it's the process of growth and discovery. So let's move on, and thank you so much for your responses. I did the same thing on Twitter, and pretty much a lot of the responses that came back were similar to what you've been saying here. But one of the things I started to think about was, like, what is a specific learning community? And I did a bit of a search online, and I thought to myself, you know, can we have separate communities that are just for learning? And then I thought that's a really dumb thought to think about, because we're actually all learning in our communities. But I found this particular article here that defined what a learning community is. And I would not be surprised that this is what happens in your community. So a learning community is any group of people sharing common purpose, values, goals, which collaborate in order to create, promote, or develop vibrant communities while respecting a variety of different perspectives, through using the active promotion of learning opportunities to enhance the potential of all members that create new knowledge. So when I looked at this article, I thought, that's every community, isn't it? But I was more interested in the bottom bit here, this one that says that create new knowledge. And I thought to myself, how do we create new knowledge in our communities? Rather than our communities being ones of consumption where people are just reading or sharing articles or sharing tips, what are they actually doing with what they're reading, what they're learning? How are they bringing it back into the community as opposed to doing something themselves individually? So the question I ask is, how is your community creating new knowledge? Okay. And I want to actually park that question here because I'm going to show you another QR code very soon. But I want to actually take a trip to the past now. Now, every couple of years, my parents and I, we like to go on a regional road trip. We don't go too far. We're still in the state of Victoria, but we like to drive out to some regional towns and go exploring the vineyards and the cheese factories and buying local produce and, you know, enjoying the restaurants in the evenings in these towns. And we love it. But every town that we visit in Victoria, we come across these places called mechanics institutes, and they kind of like they're a relic from the past, and every town we go to there's always one of these. And I don't know if any of you have seen what these are. And Vanessa, if you wouldn't mind in the background, if there's anyone, you know, if you've got a thumbs up that yes, you've seen what these are and you know what these are, then that's great. Well, I want to actually talk about what these mechanics institutes are and the whole idea. So let's take a trip to the past. Now, what these mechanics institutes were the precursor to adult education. They were started by a guy in Scotland by the name of Jason Birkbeck, and it was in the late 1700s to the early 1800s. And what he did was he he founded these public lectures in arts, sciences, and technology that were funded by, well, they weren't funded, they were provided by volunteers, and they were in each of the different towns in Scotland. And what they did was, if you think about it, in the late 1700s, there was a massive societal change going on. It was the start of the Industrial Revolution. And what people needed back then was they needed labour to go into the factories because there was this big, massive move of mechanisation of industry, and all they had were like labourers in farms, so they had to train people up quite quickly and across the entire UK and also Australia and America. They're all over the place, and they came up with these mechanics institutes where in the evenings and during the day people were able to go to these institutes and be able to learn new skills. They were able to connect with each other, and they were able to basically be trained up for a new society, a society that was going through so much change. And a lot of these people were unskilled, they were illiterate, they didn't have opportunities like we have here. But they became so popular so much that the scale of them was huge. In Australia, we had 1,200 of these at one time, and currently 6 are only in operation, and there's only 500 around. And around the world, they were massive. And I started to think, this is really the first precursor to adult education. This is social and community learning at scale, because they needed it to build in effect, a new society. And that's when I started thinking, crikey, are our online communities kind of like the new mechanics institutes? It was a question. How can we scale our online communities to get our new people ready for a new world, a very complex world, and a world that we probably don't know what we're facing? Are our online communities kind of like the new mechanics institutes? In order to understand whether your community is innovating, the first question we have to ask is, do we know who are the motivated community members in your community who are actually creating and sharing their knowledge, as well as producing resources for the community? So do you know the people who are actively sharing? So it looks as if there's a lot of people who know who these people are. Bonus, fantastic. The second question that we understand whether our community is innovating is your community pursuing challenging problems together and in the process gaining new skills and competencies? It's fairly close here between yes and no. I'll just refresh that again, see if there's any other responses. So that's another way of looking at whether your community is innovating. What are the skills, competencies, capabilities that your people are gaining just by being part of that community? The third aspect is, let's have a look. Do your community members have a high autonomy and ownership over their ideas and co-coordinate tasks that need to be done while exercising some constraint to promote creativity? And it looks as if, yep, there is a lot of people there doing a lot of yeses. So what I meant to explain there is anyone who shares an idea, if there's any actions that need to be done through that community, do people get involved, and is there some constraint? A constraint could be a time limitation, a budget limitation, a resource limitation. So it looks as if your communities are all okay there. The fourth one as to understand whether your community is innovating is whether they undertake group reflective practices. Okay, this is an interesting one. A lot of people say no here. You might have individuals reflecting on what they did back at work, to the community, but you're not actually, it sounds as if you don't have like a group community project where everyone is reflecting on that. So that could be an area to explore, and we can talk about some learning practices that you can do here. And then the fifth one is, does your community create, design, prototype, test, experiment, and build solutions collaboratively? And there's a lot of no's there. And again, this might be an area of what we could do to explore some learning practices that you could do to build that into your communities and get people actually creating something together and scaling it up across another community or into society. And then the last one is, do you have a community of people who come from diverse backgrounds with different perspectives and viewpoints? Fantastic. A lot of yeses there. Even more fantastic if you've got communities that are not based around a particular job role, like communities of just community members, or communities with just particular roles. That you've got communities that come from a diverse background, diverse jobs, diverse cultures as well. So really good. Thank you so much for those responses. I'll go back to the presentation and move on. So I got these questions from the concept of communities of innovation. Now, communities of innovation was actually a concept that was developed by Professor Richard West in about 2009. So it's not a new framework, and it's a little bit different from the communities of practice or any other communities that you might come across. His idea was basically around the premise that creativity is not the lone genius. Creativity stems from group collaborative efforts, and that within a community there are certain aspects that will determine whether it's one that innovates. And usually these aspects are what's outlined in this slide. So a community of innovation is usually a community that is there's a lot of safety there. So it's got community and psychological safety. So the members can show and share their work. They're in a trusted, safe space. Everyone is equal. There's no kind of hierarchy or ranking or gamification as to who is, the most valued contributor. Everyone is similar. They also, at a group level, they come from diverse backgrounds, but they also have diverse skills and different knowledge and experiences. They're driven by a common vision. A common vision could be to solve something, solve a problem, or do something. They're also a community that works together, collaborates on a particular project tests things out, experiments on it, creates frameworks, and shares it out to other groups. And they have what's known as a hacker ethic, not in a bad sense of what hackers are, but what they want to do is they want to break stuff. They want to try things out. They want to test and experiment. So they've got this dynamic expertise, skill and experience. And these are short-lived. So it's kind of like you come in, you do what you have to do, and then you learn from it. You have the group reflective processes, and then you move on and you apply that and you share what you've learnt to other communities. So effectively, it's unlike a community of practice, which is a term that you may have come across, which is a little bit more static around building our own practices and getting to know and build our own skills. A community of innovation is something that is very dynamic and broader. Okay. So let's go into some learning activities that could build up in your communities around these various aspects of group reflection and creating and prototyping. First things first, let's look at some learning practices that you can do together. And again, there is no right or wrong answer here. And if you've got your own learning practices, or you've got your own ideas, or if you know of other communities who have done things, put it in the chat box, and then that way people can see it. So I pulled together some things where you can actually do an activity, a quest, a project together. And, you know, it usually involves creating some kind of resource with the community, for the community, that could also be used externally as well. One recent example was I was on Twitter, as I usually am on most days, and I don't know who this guy is, but Tim McCormick actually responded to a tweet, and he said that he was writing a book, but he was collaboratively writing a book on village buildings. And he invited a lot of people to create that. And I thought, man, that's an excellent quest, if I could use, Vanessa, your word. That's a great way of being able to create something together. Create a book, write a book with all your experiences and your knowledge into it. And you've got the tools to be able to do that. I mean, recently we wrote a book at Adopt and Embrace, and we did it all together through Microsoft Teams. So you can actually create something together quite simply because the tools are there. Another one is you could create a YouTube channel or a video or something that is creative, that actually shows what the community does, how it helps people, what problems you're solving. You can create a framework if, you know, depending on what your community is about. If you've got a framework that is created by community members, how do you know if this framework can't be used for other people who want to also incorporate that into to build a new community, a spin-off community? You can do things like that. You could create a podcast, but I'm not saying that it's driven by the community manager or the person who manages that community. I'm talking about the community members are driving these resources. They're the ones actually creating them. They're the ones actually doing the work, if that makes sense. I know someone wrote that they run workshops and masterclasses. Yeah, you can do that. That's also, excuse me, another way of being able to create something together. One of the things that you could do is, I was in Rotary many years ago, and Rotary is a community service organisation. They tap into business and other community service sectors. What's not to say that what you're doing within your online communities, you can tap into other, I guess, local, national and international areas and businesses and other communities where you can actually find a project to help out with. You know, there's an opportunity there. And another one is you can actually create your own MOOC, or massive open online course. And one that I did some time ago, let me find it, because this is of interest. This is where a community actually creates the course. So this is one that I participated back in 2013. These are not new. This is where the community actually creates an online course for the world, and that online course is related to your topic of interest. This particular one was on educational technologies. So this was a co-created online course where we all had our own assignments, which were provided by the community. We shared our blog posts. We learnt from each other. We had, what are some of the topics? We had all the various topics, the schedules. So there's nothing stopping your community from actually creating an open online course and engaging the wider world to be part of it. You can easily do something like this.
Helen, I have a question relating to one of the things on that list. Actually, the slide before where you were talking about reflective practices.
Yeah.
I think, and it's a really good question. I think so. From Catherine, how do you navigate? I guess whether you're seeding and encouraging them or auspicing them, facilitating them from a managerial status. How do you navigate a group reflective process with a community that's open to the general public? So it's maybe not gated, it's not bounded. It's sitting there on the internet for passers-by to take part in or to view, and maybe the boundaries aren't necessarily terribly strong in that way. And these are communities that Catherine's referring to that are service providers to the general public, of a type to whom a duty of care is owed. So how do you balance, I guess, that series of that cocktail of sensitivities there, where you want to engage in a reflective process as a community operations tactic to help the people in the community, but you're also in public, but you also, as a service provider, have a duty of care to these individuals. So how do you do you have any advice for balancing, the vulnerabilities required of a reflective practice in that case?
Yeah. I think, and this is where you have to be careful, and this is where I would say keep it within your own communities. So group reflection within your own communities, with a group who is going through the process, if that makes sense. So if they've got the project, let them do that reflection amongst themselves, and then share what you're learning out to the group when you're ready. So I wouldn't be doing it publicly unless there is something that is not private. I'll show you an example if that makes sense a bit further on. So it's through working out loud. Yeah, so I would say your group reflection, think about it, is keep the group reflection, especially if you're testing something out, if you've got still questions around it, keep it within the communities, because that's the safe space. And you could easily do that by allocating some time, or allocating some time in your communities, maybe doing a webinar where people can actually share those group reflecting activities, but it's not written anywhere, but it's captured within the webinar or recorded within the webinar. You can lock it down that way if you wanted to. You can have what's known as, I've been experimenting with Wakelet boards. I don't know if anyone has seen these. Let me just show you an example of a Wakelet board. And a Wakelet board is, let me find it first. I'm doing the wrong thing. Here we go. Now, Wakelet is a great little site where you can actually you can actually just have your community members be part of a Wakelet board. Now, what Wakelet does is you might come across different tools, different articles, references, resources out on the web. And what you do is you pull these things together and you create what's known as a collection. Okay. And these are my collected boards. And these boards can be public, they can be private as well. So you might have, say, if you wanted a community board around, I'm going to click on, where was it? My Working Out Loud experiment. So if I click on that, what I've done here is, this is the way I have done a reflective day post, where I have provided some content and then I've pulled in the various tweets during this day. So what I was doing here was I was working out loud through my entire day. This could be something that you might engage your community members to work out loud through their day, or work out loud through a particular project that they're doing together. And they are pulling in pictures of what they're doing, photos, videos. If they're sharing it out onto the internet, some links, you could pull that in. And what you do is, that way it creates a story of what people are doing in real time. So as you can see here, I've created a whole day of, what did I do my day? Who did I talk to? What did I find out? What did I learn? What conferences did I go to, and so forth. And it's been captured here on the day. But these collections, as you can see, is you can invite certain people. So you might have a group reflective process that happens on sites like this, where it's a closed group and people can actually add to these collections and add their own reflections, add their own photos, videos, ideas that are going in, and they're all in the one place. And you don't have to share them out to the public, if you're not ready. So that is just one example of a way to do group reflective experiences in online communities. So hopefully that makes sense. This is just one example, but you can do other ways. Like I mentioned, you can run a webinar and you can have people talk, or you can have a community space, which is a channel that could be private, where you can have that reflection happen in those private channels. I did mention working out loud, which is a great way of encouraging people to show and share their work transparently, their thinking. It's mapping their thinking, understanding what are they doing and why are they doing it, why are they meeting with certain people to understand how they go about doing it. Now, if you want to learn more about working out loud, just simply do a Google search. The work of John Stepper, I'll just go back into this. Where was it? Let me find out. If you go into Working Out Loud, John Stepper resources, he has a whole heap of different, guides on how you can encourage your community to work out loud. And there's nothing stopping you from, maybe a simple thing that you can do is creating a Working Out Loud circle within your community and going through and doing some of the activities here where it's a trusted, safe space. People over the course of 12 weeks could really work on a project together, determine something, and show and share their work. So this is this is a resource that you could use. So that's Working Out Loud, John Stepper's resources. I'll go back to my presentation. And I showed you the wakelet. Other ones you could do, and this is where it would require, I guess, some creativity. So anyone who has done this, let me know. I'd love to be able to also showcase what you're doing and learn from it, is running online labs. I know Microsoft does it really well. Microsoft has a community where they encourage people with the various products to work on different projects, to test out different problems that they're working on, and then sharing those to that community. One in particular, I'm currently a member of what's known as the Power Platform, and the Power Platform is a program which automates a lot of the functions back-end processes. So if you use Zapier, or if you've used this program called If This Then That, it pretty much does that. So it automates everything in the back end. And I'm part of a community where all these power automators are doing some funky stuff, and they're showing that to that community. We could use that code or that template for ourselves. So you might be able to create within your community some kind of database of all different projects that need people to be worked on, to work on together. You might create some online labs, maybe have a series of masterclasses where you're working on a particular project, and people are doing this together and getting online, actually showing what they're doing and how they're working and testing things out. You could create a hackathon. There are various sites that you could do that through Meetup and actually create a hackathon to test something else out. I'm a mad keen knitter. I love to knit, and there's this site for knitters called Ravelry, and on Ravelry they have what's known as knit-alongs, and it's really interesting. Knit-alongs are test where knitters, experienced knitters, unlike me, but these are experienced knitters who create patterns. They want to test their pattern out. They want to see if that pattern works. So what they do is they create these knit-alongs, and people get copies of their patterns, and they start to do the pattern together. They start to knit the pattern, and then they're showing and sharing how they're progressing through it. And this gives feedback for the designer of that pattern to understand whether he or she has written the pattern correctly, whether there is something that everyone is doing that should be changed in the pattern. So you might have some kind of knit along, actually not knitting, but whatever your topic is. So have something similar to that. So these are just kind of some ideas that you could use for prototyping.
I have a question for you, Helen. I'm really interested in, we talk a lot in community, and it's been raised at Swarm a number of times this year already, how important it is, for us to not have a static status quo community, because it ceases to be a community and a living social structure if we do. So, we bring people together, we gather, we convene around an idea, a purpose, some sort of animating force. And to survive and thrive, the community needs to progress. It needs to move, right? And part of that is, a learning energy. It needs to learn stuff. So I'm really interested in the relationship between an individual's journey and trajectory through a community, that need for community progression, and this bunch of tool sets that you're describing, a bunch of techniques and tactics that can help that. I mean, I don't really have a direct question other than to ask.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I wish I had the answer to that, but then I would say, if we could think about the communities that we are part of, what is the one thing that is keeping us there? Like, obviously to some people could be connection, to some people it could be belonging, to some people that they're always learning something new in that community. And I would say find out what is keeping your community members there, because then by understanding why they're there, you'll then be able to understand how you could then encourage, keep and keep more of that stuff that is being able to keep community members. For me, I remember being part of the ETMERC community was something that, I don't know, I found actually it's going to sound weird, life-changing. It was the fact that I was a part of a group where people really valued their own learning. They wanted to be there. That was the first thing that they would get on every day, to see, who has responded in the community. There was always something of interest, always something that I could read, that I could learn from. There was someone online that I could chat with, and we also created things together. We created a music video to the song of Queen. That was something that actually got everyone involved. We had to choose our part to play. We had to choose the lyrics that we had to mime and then video ourselves. And we created a music video together. And that was something that really blew my mind, because I had never been in a community that was so focused on learning, focused on creating something together. And also this particular community, we're still around. We actually did various fundraising projects together, and we're still connected. So the answer to the question, I would say, is find out from your members what is keeping them there, and then have more of that.
Yeah, great. it perfectly simple and sort of clarion. I think my background's in the theatre before I got into technology.
Wonderful. Yeah.
I find that I draw on the set of skills involved in putting on a show, whether on the creative team, or production team, or in the cast. I draw on that in a very similar way to what you described on a almost daily basis, in terms of being part of that bigger picture and that whole. I think it was such useful training for life.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, why not bring in our external interests and our passions, and seeing what we do out, like in your case was theatre, in my case was knitting, and bring elements of those into the community. So yeah, great idea. So one of the things I just wanted to also talk about very quickly, I know we've got a few more minutes, is building in new voices. So what I wanted to say here was, there might be opportunities in your online communities to then, you are ready to go out into the networks and actually show and share what you've been doing in your communities to the networks, to people who are not your community members. And by doing that, you're actually inviting new voices into it. So you might be able to share some of your work through Twitter or through LinkedIn. Why not have a community hashtag, that you could share, and you could build in new voices and have people from outside in the other networks actually contribute to some ideas as well. So I've written here, how can you create a buzz with your community so you could spread it out to open social networks and invite contribution and participation? And then what you're doing is you're inviting new ideas and new insights from people who are not part of your community. So that's really, in a nutshell, I just wanted to touch on some practices around how to make your communities into ones of innovation. And the ones of innovation are ones that are doing stuff, collaborating, creating projects, working on projects, building in new voices, having group reflective activities that you can use.